I'd like to call to order City of Lawrence Redevelopment Commission, Tuesday, July 29th, Redevelopment Commission meeting. And I would like for Joe, he needs to read a statement for those online or watching online.
Yes, thank you. The public is invited to attend the Lawrence Redevelopment Commission. The RDC may impose reasonable restrictions on the number of attendees to control audience density in consideration of the existing COVID-19 national emergency. The public may participate remotely by dialing 463-777-8704 and entering the participation code 368096. In addition, if you would like to provide comments remotely, please email them to jmurphy, M-U-R-P-H-Y, at cityoflawrence.org. Commissioners, we're now going to do a roll call for attendance. So please respond with here when you hear your name. David Blunt?
Here.
Jerry Clifford?
Here.
Non-voting advisory member Dick Friege?
Here.
Melissa Swindell?
In the waiting room, waiting to be admitted.
Melissa, can you hear us?
I can. Sorry, I got disconnected for a moment.
No problem. We were just in the middle of roll call for attendance, so if I could just say you here as I call your name. Melissa Swindell?
Here.
Thank you. Ray Rohana?
Here.
Cheryl Sullivan?
Here.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Mr. President, if I may,
Yes.
I want to make the public aware that the City of Lawrence Redevelopment Commission is very much in respect of the governor's mask order. You may see that some of us at our positions do not have masks. It's so the public and those in attendance can hear us. And you may note and may not be able to see, but the city has spent extensive money to isolate us via plexiglass screening. So we are in full compliance with the governor's mandate.
All right, so we are ready to start our meeting. I'm assuming that all of the commissioners have had time and have reviewed the minutes of our regular meeting from last month and minutes of our executive session, which was last month as well. Is there any questions, comments, or concerns with those minutes?
We'll need a separate motion for each set of minutes.
Okay. Motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from June
23rd.
2020.
Mr. President, I move that we accept the minutes as submitted.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All right, we will do a roll call vote. David Blunt?
Yeah.
Jerry Clifford?
Yes?
Melissa Swindell?
Yes.
Ray Rohana?
Yes.
Cheryl Sullivan?
Yes.
I would also like to motion, or I would like to have approval for the executive session of minutes from June 2020.
We have a first by Cheryl.
Okay.
Second by Jerry. All right. Roll call vote. David Blunt?
Yes.
Jerry Clifford?
Yes?
Melissa Swindell?
Yes.
Ray Rohana?
Yes.
Cheryl Sullivan?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Fenwick, can you come up to review the claims and purchase orders for payment?
In that particular regard, I'll just entertain if there are any questions to the claims list. I mean, this is kind of the routine list of invoices that are presented on a monthly basis to the RDC.
No questions.
Have a motion for approval of the claims and purchase orders.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second by Jerry.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote. David Blunt?
Approve.
Jerry Clifford?
Approved.
Melissa Swindell,
Approved.
Ray Rohana,
Approved.
Cheryl Sullivan. Thank you.
And also, Mr. Fenwick, can you give us a financial position report?
Yes, so you should have received two PDFs from Joe today. I'd like to briefly go through the first one, which is the one with multiple pages that's titled the Redevelopment Commission Financial Update. Yes, that one, as of June 2020. The only thing of significance I would like to point out, actually there are two things. One, if you go to page 3, and this just gives you a snapshot of the actual cash balances in the varying redevelopment funds as of June 30th. And I would point out that the main fund, our redevelopment capital fund, ended June 30 with 1.4 million in the account, which was up from about 200,000 from the previous year. So obviously we still have a very strong cash position right now in the redevelopment capital fund. If you will flip to page 4, the only thing I'd like to point out on this page, this is again the redevelopment capital fund. The first column, or the column in the middle, is a month-to-date comparison this year versus last year. And if you look at the line item that says receipts and then TIF Pendleton Pike for 2020, the receipt was 247,658 year-to-date. Versus last year, the receipt was 298,665, so a reduction of about 51,000. That's obviously property taxes, or the TIF, the increment that is generated. So we're seeing this on the civil city side as well, with the governor's extension of the penalties on property tax payments was such that it basically gave taxpayers until July 10th, I believe, to make the first half payment, or the spring payment. On the city side, we saw a similar decrease because those who, just some people had the option to not pay and they didn't pay. Those payments are still due and they need to be paid by December 31st. And so the state has said those that make that July 10th payment, we may get that distribution in September, or we may just get it with the fall settlement in December. So the reduction isn't necessarily indicative of anything other than some people choosing not to pay. So right now, I would expect we will get that payment in full with the fall settlement in December. So if there are any other questions with those pages, I'd like to then tie that back to the pro formas that we had from the last month, which was the second attachment. And the only thing that's changed from last month is an additional $10,000 for the Freegee project, which I think Tom John will get to momentarily on the agenda. But I would like to point out that in this pro forma under the column 2020 on projected, the first line item under revenue is the TIF Pendleton Pike. And we estimated 460,000 for all of 2020. So if you go back to the previous attachment, the year-to-date money we've received was 247,000. So even on a worst-case scenario, we don't get the money that was delayed through July, multiply it times 2, we're still going to receive more than what we've put in the pro forma. So it's a conservative pro forma projection. So that's all I'd like to point out.
Any questions for Mr. Fenwick before he has a seat?
Thanks for doing that.
I might point out that Jason and I are spending a day in advance going over the budget that you asked and that he's presented to be sure that everything we anticipate you being asked to do is covered. You want to elaborate on that any more than that?
No, I think, going forward, I think on a monthly basis, you'll be receiving what we believe to be everything we know that we could have out there in terms of expenditures and additional revenue, if any.
Good.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Fenwick.
President, if I may, this is Ashley. Can I just go back and make a quick revision to the minutes, if I may, at this time? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Commissioner Swindell, I believe this is her first meeting, so she was not present at that executive session or the last meeting, so it would probably be a best practice to reflect that she abstained from the approval of those minutes since she wasn't at that executive session or the prior meeting, if that's okay with you, Commissioner Swindell.
Yes, that's fine with me.
Okay. I just had that thought after we took the vote, so I wanted to point that out. Thank you.
All right. Old business. Mr. Zerner, do you want to go over number 1, Pendleton Pike update, 8102 and 8150?
So good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with all of you again. Commissioners, thank you for your service. As kind of share a little laugh with you, Mary Jo earlier today was reviewing the agenda and told me how concerned she was because there's so much on it. I said I'd reviewed it and thought it was so short. So this is an example of what I expect us to be doing every month. And I thank you for staying in there with me.
Just making sure you saw the second page.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
So 8102, 8150 Pendleton, most of you realize that's the old car wash on Pendleton Park that the city has an interest in acquiring to be sure that it's developed in accordance with what our vision is for Pendleton Park going forward. We all did receive one appraisal that we paid for. It was a little bit of a shock to the owner. They thought it should have appraised a little higher, which we would have expected. So they had to think about that a little bit, but as of yesterday, the owner has ordered the second appraisal out of a firm, Bear Wade out of Carmel, and we agreed to have the phase 2 completed, and I gave notice to proceed for that this morning, and that will be paid out of our EPA assessment grants. So everything's on track right now for us to have some further discussion probably as we approach next month's meeting relative to the disposition of that purchase. So we'll see how that goes.
I have a question for you, sir.
Yes, sir?
Will the second appraiser see the first appraisal?
No.
Okay.
And also, one of the things I reminded the owner of that property, and I'll just be categorically upfront with you, is that what we did in our stipulation was, in our purchase offers, we protected our interests, saying that we were not obligated to pay more than 15%, I believe it was, above the original appraisal should the second one came in high. But that didn't mean that we wouldn't complete the purchase if it came in 20% high. We have the ability to consider that, decide whether we want to or not, depending on what the final number is, but we're only obligated to 15% more than the first appraisal. So we'll see how that comes in. So anyway, that's moving forward. Any further questions on that?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tom, John, if you would like to come over and review number 2, the 3G project. Looks like there are a few things there that we need to discuss.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So the good news is we keep moving, and we made some good progress here. The 3G project is in a state where you're actually being asked to approve documents finally. And these are documents that are actually going to get this done. So since we were last together, the project, the vacation of Plummer Street.
I'm sorry, Tom, I'm going to interrupt you. Could you give a 1 or 2 minute overview to our new Commissioner Swindle of what this project is, please?
I apologize, Commissioner. So, Commissioner, the 3G project, as we referred to it, is on the north side of Pendleton Pike, just east of the interstate entrance. And it is a series of 3 parcels that were a former gas station, a former hotel, and things that were community blight that the city had come in, torn down several years ago. They'd been sitting vacant for a while. The city took an RFP out 2.5, 3 years ago. In response to that, a partnership with 3G, Applied Engineering, and Browning Development came in and came up with a project that the underlying project, and as you can see from these documents, is ultimately that they'll bring a headquarters here with at least 125, likely several more employees. and a $6 million investment in that site, which will now be their headquarters for all of their operations. And so it's been a project that they've been excited to come do and be a citizen of Lawrence. And frankly, it's one that really, with that area being a gateway and with the new development that you've seen with Menards and some of the other things that have really brought areas of that property back, it's the other side to really begin anchoring that area. And the grand vision, the mayor's vision for this is as a trades district that we can enter into partnerships with Lawrence schools and utilize the great programs that we have there and really be an attractor to those sorts of good jobs, which are north of $30 an hour. In fact, that's what they've committed to as an average of north of $30 an hour jobs. So it's going to be a keystone to that development of that whole area and allow us to fund the improvement of infrastructure in that area and to support other projects in that area. The increment from this will actually be somewhere north of $200,000 a year just on itself. So it's an exciting project that I kind of got the opportunity to come in late and get it across the line with my colleagues at Ice Miller. But I think it'll be something special, and they literally, as soon as we get the final approvals done through city planning, they will be ready to get building, and they hope to be in it next year. So it's a project that's going to move. So with that, I'll get into some of the details. Some of this is just letting people know. One of the things that had to happen is because there were 4 parcels that they were split. So you had to unify them. There was Plummer Street, which bisected these parcels. And you could not build the project without that being vacated. There's a company called Mill Supply that utilized that road and had objected to that. We ultimately have worked out an agreement with regard to them where, for lack of a better term, we've taken Plummer from being a east-west road to a north-south road to allow for clear ingress-egress of semi-tractor trailers for their property because they have several a day that come on their property. And throughout that process, Browning and Freegee were great partners to help figure out how we could both build their facility and allow for this ingress and egress out of Mill Supply. The vacation, subject to the commitment to actually build Plummer North, as I'll call it, was passed by the MDC earlier this month. And so that cleared that essentially once we build Plummer North, which will be done actually by Freegee, or by Browning on behalf of Freegee, then the commitment will go through, which allows the vacation of Plummer and the work on the rest of the property that'll go. So that was a big hurdle that frankly stood in the way of this project for several months, and that's now cleared. Now to clear that, and that's where we get to some of the documents that you were here, we had to put together a tripartite agreement between the City of Lawrence, Mill Supply, and B&B Investments, which B&B Investments is the special purpose entity that holds the property that Mill Supply operates on and actually owns the buildings, and Freegee and their special purpose, which is Mackle. And this agreement set forth that basically the City of Lawrence would take on an additional obligation to ensure that this Plummer North gets built, and then to maintain it as right-of-way after that fact. We also are due to, and some commissioners know this, but there may or may not have been approaches taken early on that were the most efficacious to getting this project done in the best way. So part of this settlement, frankly, was to compensate Mill Supply for costs for engineering and legal fees that they put into fighting us. Because frankly, they had a point, and ultimately, we got to a point where we were able to meet their concerns. But from a planning, from a zoning perspective, they had a leg to stand on. And so a part of that agreement, in addition to giving them the ingress and egress, is it's not making them whole. They claim that their expenses were significantly more, but we also told them there's a limit. They had tried to request significantly more, actually, but we negotiated down to $80,000 that's being reimbursed, that they have already submitted invoices to us. So that's one of the elements of that agreement. As I said, the other element is that we're funding and that Freegie's committing to this Plummer North construction, and committing that we would then enter into the Second Amendment to the development agreement, which underlies this, to fund the Freegie work on that additional. So to get to that document, the Second Amendment has a few details, and I'll go through the highlights, and then if you have questions, you can ask me about it. Now, on the one hand, it does do some deadline changes, which are simply we had gotten outside of our timelines that the previous agreements had had by delays. So there are several of those that I won't go through in detail. However, it also does obligate us to an additional payment. It changes the payment structure to Freegie. And in that, it does two things. One is it obligates us to an additional $300,000 payment to them on top of the original $300,000 that the agreement would have had. Now, it also, though, stretches out the amount of time that those payments would be made. On the initial agreement, theoretically, they could have began submitting to us for reimbursement upon inception of work. Under this agreement, we now will owe them at substantial completion occupancy, so sometime next year. And then that payment of $300,000, and then an additional payment in August of 2023 of $300,000. The advantage of that is we cycle through, they should be in there. That means you have an assessed valuation that comes online in 2022. So a good chunk of that 2023 will actually get paid by the AV from the project. So, and they were willing to work with us on that timing to make sure that it helps us fund the project and allow a lot of the things you're trying to do right now. So that was a part of, I mean, we could have gotten into and line itemed on the amounts that it was costing them extra to do the project and such. We ended up stepping away from that and saying, can we come up with a holistic solution that, quite honestly, they're going to spend more probably than $600,000 or than the $300,000 additional $1,000. But we gave them certainty. They don't have to come to us and document anything, and they're giving us the extended timeline. So it worked out well as far as, I think, making the progress work. Now, one of the additional things we did give them, which Commissioner Clifford pointed out, so I'd want to get into, is there's an out clause in this, and actually it's dual out clauses. The reason for the out clauses are, quite frankly, Freegie was at wit's end in June. And they were unsure. They had felt like this had really been stuck in neutral for over a year. And they continued to spend money on engineering and other things. They had shared with me that they'd spent upwards of $400,000 on this project and really didn't have anything to show for it yet. With regard to that, I said, hang with us. We're almost there, I promise you. I get it, right? They have concerns about that, regardless how honest I may look. So ultimately, the agreement that we came to is, okay, if we can't give them the ability to build by this fall, they get out and we will pay them for part of their fees. Then you'll see the later deadline of next year. Quite frankly, we put that in because if we didn't get through the RDC or the MDC initially, that would have allowed us a legislative solution next year, which we don't need now. But we were trying to allow for that possibility. If they would hang with us that additional year, lose an additional year of certainty of where they're going to be, lose an additional year of potentially another build season even, that they'd do it. And so that's what those are in there. Given the fact we now have MDC approval, And given the fact that obviously we as Lawrence, right, you, our council, our mayor are all pulling in the same direction on this and what this is, the likelihood of those happening, given Freegie's absolute commitment to this project and everybody else's, I'll tell you, is near zero. Because literally, it would have to be our own city zoning and planning would have to stand in the way at this point, and I can't imagine that happening.
Might need to point out to the commissioners that we keep talking about 300,000 here and 300,000 here. There, these two 600,000, that $600,000 component, 300 times 2, is largely a reimbursement of the cost to relocate Plummer Street. Other types of items that the city would have incurred on its own, but we felt like it was cheaper to build in the private side construction, get it all done while everybody was on site instead of multiple contractors remobilizing, trying to coordinate. So it's not like we're handing them $600,000 for nothing. I want to be sure that you understand that we went through very specific budgets and reviewed construction numbers and things that they were asking for to come up with that number to be sure that we were getting a good value. So that's not a charitable donation. They've earned that money through the additional scope that we've imposed upon them to complete this project. I think that's important to point out.
Yeah, and even setting aside North Plummer Street, the additional part of this, so to speak, that first 300,000, there are several foundations in this land. Like, this is not what I'd call shovel-ready. These are historic sites that have historic impediments to them too. So it would have all along been offsetting, to Dan's point, the complexity of the site. Now, there are benefits to it too for them, but I think this ends up being a very good deal for everybody involved, and I'm excited to say it's there. Now, that being said, oh wait, there's more. We did have, in the process of this, we found out that there was an environmental report that frankly even Dan and I weren't aware of until pretty recently, that when we shared it with them, raised concerns because there is an environmental impact from an old filling station. The good news is it's been characterized, it's been reviewed, and for the most part is not a big deal at all. But to have bona fide purchaser position, we need a phase one completed, describing and keeping in mind the use that's going to be made of the property, and then blessing of that from IDEM. So given the fact that apparently suggestions had been made to Freegee that they would get the site clean, we did feel like we had went through all these negotiations and never had mentioned it because we didn't know about it, that it was fair for us to put them in that position. What that frankly entails is less than $10,000, but we've retained EnviroForensics to do that phase one specifically for Freegee Mackle. And my partner, Terry Chaika, who is an excellent environmental attorney, is working through that project. And like I said, it'll be the EnviroForensics is $3,500 for their part of it to do the phase one, and then another couple of thousand to finish the comfort letter negotiations with IDEM. And
They'll be on site Friday.
what'd you say?
They'll be on site Friday.
Yeah. And then Terry's just overseeing it. And so I've frankly told her, make sure it goes right, but spend as little time as you can making sure it goes right. So that's the environmental matter with regard to that. But thankfully, it's not an impediment to finishing the project, but it is an unexpected, it's an additional expense of about $10,000, give or take, we think. And the key thing with it really is timing, in that we're working to make sure that we can help get their lender comfortable with it as quickly as possible so they can get in the ground this year. Because it's not a question of whether they're going to get there through IDEM, it's a question of how quickly you get their lender comfortable so they can get their financing so they can start digging.
So do we need these resolutions approved?
Yes, so to that note, you have, sorry.
Question?
Yes, sure.
What's the completion date? Sans The environmental impact study.
End of 2021.
Oh, you don't have a date certain?
December 2021.
Thank you.
Well, that's when they're supposed to be moved in. It may be sooner. It's really going, because they're going to be building through the winter. If we have a good winter, then they could be maybe, I mean, I'm saying this, they aren't saying this, but it could be a year, 14 months, or it could be,
The best way to say it, Jerry, it's a 14-month construction schedule, but they're waiting on us to get things cleared up so they can move forward.
So the environmental impact study, you're assuming that you're not going to go beyond phase 1, okay?
No.
How soon can that be done?
excuse me?
How soon could that be done?
I think we can get it done next couple weeks, hopefully.
Also,
So they're getting site access Friday.
And it's basically a recap. We've already had three.
wait, that's not holding anything up.
No, we've had 3 phase 1s, 3 phase 2s, and this phase 1 is just basically a recap of the last one, being sure nothing has
Cool.
changed.
I'm sorry, I was thinking.
It sounds scarier than it is, but thankfully, it had previously been characterized even, it's had phase 2, there've been some
I'm good.
groundwater monitoring.
Great, thanks. Okay.
And so then basically, we have a resolution for 2020 that implements and empowers the president to execute and adopt the underlying transfer of property, which will not happen until we get through the comfort letter process, but it empowers it so we're positioned to do it. It approves the Second Amendment to the MACL agreement, all the details we just discussed, and approves the tripartite agreement and the payment thereunder to Mill Supply. So that's what that resolution actually allows for. Any questions?
I was going to say, are there any other questions for Tom while he's still up here?
So I would ask for a motion to approve resolution number 4-2020.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 4-2020.
Do I have a second?
Second?
We'll do a roll call vote. David Blunt,
Yes.
Jerry Clifford,
Yes.
Melissa Swindell,
Yes.
Ray Rohana,
Yes.
Cheryl Sullivan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan, number 3, I want to go back to you for the 4711 German Church Road.
Thank you. So we've had this on the agenda the last 2 or 3 months. There's 2 actions to that tonight we're going to ask you for. First is we've had a submission of quotes for demolition and recommendation of approval for demolition of the buildings that we've discussed on that. Joe's prepared to share with you who we solicited and the quotes we received.
Yeah, thank you. So on July 7th, 2020, the City of Lawrence sent out requests for quotes to 7 local area businesses for the demolition of the 4711 German Church property. Specifically, we were requesting for the removal of all structures, excavation of foundation walls to a minimum of 4 foot below grade, and filling of any crawl space or basement cavities with compact soil to surface grade. Those requests for quotes went out via certified mail to Poindexter Excavating, Wills Excavating, Denny Excavating, Casey Burtum Construction Incorporated, P&P Demolition, Delta Services, and the Ashby Group. Of the 7 groups that we contacted, we had 3 responses who submitted full proposals by the end of day on July 22nd. Those were Denny Excavating, who estimated a total cost of $29,500. The Ashby Group, who estimated a total cost of $25,000. And Casey Burtum Construction, who estimated a total cost of $23,105. And I've got, I'll send you guys all the full proposals that they submitted, but those are the bottom line numbers.
So I have personally reviewed those in accordance with what I would do as a commercial contractor or construction manager. I find Casey Bertram's quote to be representative of what we asked for and the lowest and best bid for the work, and I'm asking for approval of that of that proposal.
Mr. President?
This is Cheryl. This is a question for Joe. When you send out RFPs for demolition or for any other services from the city, do you encourage women and minority-owned vendors to apply? Is there a stated encouragement?
For this particular example, we solicited local area businesses that I believe Dan compiled a list in cooperation with Mayor Collier, and that was sent out to those 7 businesses I listed. Dan, would you like to comment any further on that?
Cheryl, we do that at every possible opportunity, particularly when we have public open bidding. In this particular case, we just, as Joe said, we went to every possible demolition contractor, none of which that I know of happened to be minority or women-owned businesses, but we certainly encourage that at every opportunity and would welcome that.
And I'm asking, is there a statement in the RFPs that go out? Like a boilerplate statement on any of the RFPs?
This wasn't really an RFP, Cheryl. This was just a request for quote. So if we'd done an actual request for proposal on a project that had a scope that they would develop or those sorts of things, yes, that would be included. But in this particular case, it was just a quote. We weren't required because of the small amount of money to have a full proposal.
Okay, thank you.
So in the interest of moving the meeting forward, if I could get a motion to approve the Bertram quote, I'd appreciate it.
Can I have a motion to approve?
And I would just add that the motion should award or approve the recommendation to the contractor Dan identified as the lowest responsible and responsive quoter. That's the language of the statute.
Okay.
A motion?
Yes. I'd be
Do I have
pleased to.
a second?
I second.
There we go. Roll call vote. Mr. David Blunt.
Yes.
Mr. Jerry Clifford.
Yes.
Ms. Melissa Swindell.
Yes.
Mr. Ray Rohana.
Yes.
And Ms. Cheryl Sullivan.
Yes.
Thank you.
So moving on, the next thing I need is approval to seek 2 appraisals on that property as the next step to be able to follow the statutes, to be able to develop an offering sheet to list that property or to sell that property. I will tell you that since Jason and his team put signs out there, the phone's ringing off the wall of interest in that property. So in order for us to list an offering sheet and accept proposals, I need 2 appraisals, so I'm asking for permission to seek appraisals.
I have a question, Dan. Is the appraisals, are they going to be after the demolition and work has been done or before? Okay. Do I have approval? Do I have a motion to approve the appraisals of 4711 German Church Road?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Roll call vote. Mr. David Blunt.
Yes.
Jerry Clifford.
Yes.
Melissa Swindell.
Yes.
Ray Rohana.
Yes, sir.
Cheryl Sullivan.
Yes.
Thank you.
May I move on?
Yes.
So the next item on your agenda is, obviously, I'm pushing you all pretty hard, but in the interest of time, I need to be responsive to certain appraisals sometimes, and I can't wait a month to get them. And I will always share with you, as I have, what it is I'm asking when we do it, but I'll also bring to you why we did it, how much it costs, to be full disclosure. But so we don't have to come to this group every time I need an appraisal and wait 30 days, I'm asking for approval from this body for on-call agreements, separate on-call agreements, items 1 and items 2, as you see on your agenda, for an on-call annual not to exceed $50,000 agreement with both Don R. Scheit and Integra Real Estate Resources here in Lawrence. They've been excellent providers for a decade for us for these services. They give me quotes that I get to review ahead of time, so it'll be a fixed contract out of our balance. It won't be an open checkbook, but I need the flexibility to continue this work and close this business fast enough to have that resource available to me. Mr. Fenwick and I have had that money in the budget that we provided to you a month ago. So it's money that we would normally spend anyway. I'm not asking for anything that we haven't already taken care of. I'm just asking to be able to move forward as I need to and bring to you basically a claim for the services as we need them. So I'm asking for approval of those two on-call agreements.
Question?
Yes.
Mr. President. Dan, you want a on-call agreement for demolition services?
No, I'm sorry, we skipped that. So we've decided not to do that.
Okay.
I didn't mean to skip that, I apologize.
All right, it's all right.
We had talked about an on-call for demolition
Good. I just
last
wanted to
month.
make sure we knew.
Ashley put it on here for me to advise you that for the moment, we've decided not to ask for that.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. So I'm asking for the on-call approval for the appraisals.
Hearing no other. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
We need those separately, Ashley?
Yes, because they're two separate contracts.
So for Don R. Scheit, may I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the agreement with Don R. Scheit.
I second the motion.
Roll call vote. David Blunt,
Yes.
Jerry Clifford,
Yes?
Melissa Swindell,
Yes.
Ray Rohana,
Yes, sir.
Cheryl Sullivan.
Then I need the same for IRR, Integra Real Estate Resources.
Motion to approve Integra Real Estate Services.
All right. Do I have a second?
I second.
Roll call. David Blunt,
Yes.
Jerry Clifford,
Yes?
Melissa Swindell,
Yes.
Ray Rohana,
Yes, sir.
Cheryl Sullivan.
Yes.
There you go.
All right, the next item, David, Mr. President, if I may just continue to move on. In the interest of time, I am learning as much as you are, having been in this role now for 2 months. One of the things that's come to light is that RDC owns a lot of properties, and we've never given any consideration as to how we're going to mow them, maintain them, or take care of them. And we're asking our constituents in Lawrence to do the same. And we had a property owner bring to our attention that we own 4 lots on Franklin Street, of which the grass is waist high and the trees are growing into the adjacent buildings of property owners. And as we inspected it, we found he's absolutely right, which brings 2 things to my mind. One is we need to take care of this immediate problem right away. The second one is we need to develop a list of properties that we need to maintain and to be sure that we have a program in place to do that. We're not there on the second item yet. We do have, Mr. Fenwick and I have reviewed, we do have money in the budget for that. But I hope to the time we meet next month, have a list of what those properties are and maybe some proposals as to how we're going to maintain them and how much it's going to cost. But we're not there on the second item yet. But for right now, that property is very visible. The adjacent landowners have been very considerate of us letting it get to that stage. We need to take action, and to that point, I'll have Joe speak. He and I went out for quotes to get this problem corrected.
Yeah, so as Dan mentioned, we're trying to work on short notice, but we wanted to get this before you guys at this meeting. And so we reached out to local landscaping companies, 3 companies, to solicit quotes just for a one-time service to clean up this lot, which included cutting the grass, picking up the trash, and trimming the trees and bushes and such things like that. Like I said, we contacted 3 landscaping companies. I was only able to receive a response from one of them. The 3 companies we did contact were FC and AC Lawn and Landscaping, LT Precise Cuts, and A&S Lawn and Maintenance. A&S Lawn and Maintenance was the group that I was able to receive a response from, and they submitted what I think is a very, very competitive bid of $300 for the one-time service to clean up these parcels. And so I believe Dan is going to ask that you go ahead and approve that today.
That is correct.
I have a question before. In regards to what Commissioner Sullivan suggested earlier, I know we're doing quick this time around, but in the future, can we do some sort of boilerplate MBE, WBE request? And I know it needs to be RFP for that, but I would still like to hope to see that happen.
We can certainly put on any quote a statement that we encourage and solicit and welcome an And if you want to issue some incentive, we can do that. If you want to give them a 10% advantage or something, we can do that. I think we discuss that more as we move forward. I think we're all open to that. One of the things I will tell you that having come from the construction industry, we work on every day, we try to promote that, but we have a really difficult time of finding MBE, WBE, minority businesses in our world. That may not be true in the landscaping business, it may not be true in others, so I think we want to encourage it all that we can, just understanding that there just aren't very many that exist.
Yeah.
Mr. President,
Yes.
one comment and one suggestion going forward. Joe, is there a reason?
This is Cheryl. I'm sorry, and I just want to reemphasize that, but I think also it's both statements and RFPs, but also as staff are identifying vendors to spend some significant time on the issue.
You know, one of the things we could do if you want to go that far, and I have no problem with it, but you could actually run an ad in the local paper that the City of Lawrence is seeking information from minority women business entities and see if anybody wants to submit their qualifications to us. It's really difficult to identify and find them just in a routine ad. But we're all for helping. Now, Jason wants to make a comment.
Yes, if I could make a comment. So the mayor last year via executive order established a chief diversity officer position, which was in part to focus on this particular initiative. We actually had a staff meeting on Monday completely devoted to this initiative, and we had a representative from Ice Miller here as well. And so going forward, our city's HR director is going to be working with Ice Miller to identify through Indianapolis-based organizations that have lists of these particular type of vendors that are available. So I would think by the next executive session we have, that we could probably speak to more detail about this initiative.
Great.
Thank you. I appreciate that being placed on the agenda.
Absolutely.
Certainly.
Going forward, Joe, if you could.
Yes.
Ski landscaping would be another one that you may want to consider. Then secondly, more of a question for you and for Jason. Who in the city is going to manage this process? Manage the vendor that does this, manage the requirements for the properties to be maintained?
We have to work that out yet.
Okay.
So part of the problem we have, Commissioner Clifford, is that technically by law, it's not the city's responsibility to take care of our properties. They have been doing that to some degree without any concern, with no agreement back and forth between the RDC and the city. So that whole thing needs to be reviewed, which I intend to have on my plate in the coming weeks. It just really came to my attention.
Right.
So I don't have a better answer.
No, that's a good answer, because, I mean, the RDC we're not in the business of,
Right.
that's not what we do.
And yet the city parks and the street department really aren't in the business of maintaining properties that we decide to buy and maintain. So,
Or the city owns.
yeah, so we have to work those things out.
Okay, very good.
So right now, I would really appreciate a motion to get this one off the plate.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call vote. David Blunt,
Yes.
Jerry Clifford,
Yes.
Melissa Swindell,
Yes.
Ray Rohana,
Yes, sir.
Cheryl Sullivan.
Yes.
There you go.
And I need to back up just a moment to the demolition quotes on German Church Road and ask Mr. Murphy if he would be responsible to notifying the three parties that did submit quotes of the successful amount and the amounts of the three bidders. I think that's only fair when they take time to provide quotes, that they know what the outcomes were.
Absolutely.
It's a public meeting, so it shouldn't matter. So Ashley, this is relative, the next one, number 4, is relative to the German Church Road property, I believe, and rescinding the resolution from 2016. You want to take care of that?
I'm sorry, did you say Ashley? I couldn't hear very well.
Yes.
Okay.
This is the German Church Road, I believe, Resolution 5-2020.
Yes, this is a resolution before you in regards to prior resolutions that were passed by the commission. It is set forth in the resolution that you have before you, so I won't read that just for efficiency purposes. But basically, it is rescinding a resolution that was passed by the commission in 2016 that had authorized legal counsel to complete title searches and quiet title actions and authorized the president and executive director to execute any and all documents in relation to a transfer of certain properties to the Lawrence Community Development Corporation for demolition, rehabilitation, or construction by Habitat for Humanity. The properties that were identified in that 2016 resolution, based on the records that we've been able to obtain and review, were subsequently transferred except for the property located on German Church Road. And this resolution states that the commission has now determined that they would like to rescind that portion of the 2016 resolution. You do still maintain ownership of the property on German Church Road. We've been able to confirm that. So basically, again, this resolution rescinds a portion of the 2016 resolution only in terms of the property on German Church Road, as you now desire to retain ownership of that as part of the redevelopment plan.
So we need this resolution to allow us to continue with moving forward with the sale of the property.
Right. Your turn, Rick.
Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. David Blunt,
Yes.
Jerry Clifford,
Yes.
Melissa Swindell,
Yes.
Ray Rohana,
Yes, sir.
Cheryl Sullivan. Thank you.
Actually, since you're having a little hard time hearing, would you like me to continue? Is that okay?
That's fine, or I'm okay, whatever you prefer, Dan.
So Resolution 620-20 actually has prepared on our behalf that details all of the things that are happening, the offer sheet, the schedule, everything that you've received. It's identified in that resolution to allow us to put the 46th Street properties we've discussed multiple times up for sale. The appraisals have been completed. This is the next step in the legal process. So we're looking for approval of that resolution.
Do I have a motion to approve?
You have a motion to approve?
Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Do a roll call vote. David Blunt,
Yes.
Jerry Clifford,
Yes.
Melissa Swindell,
Yes.
Ray Rohana,
Yes, sir.
Cheryl Sullivan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next item is number 6. That's a piece of property that I've shared with you on multiple occasions now that was left over from when the city constructed a roundabout over on the east side of Monarch. It's a very tiny sliver. It's not big enough to allow anything to be built on it because of setbacks and zonings. It's adjacent to 3 businesses, all of which will receive the notice that we're going to sell the property and ask for offers, as well as a public advertisement of that sale as contained in your resolution. I'm seeking approval of this resolution to allow us to move forward with the disposition of this property. Right now, it's costing money to maintain, and we're not getting any taxes off of it, and has no value to any of us for any reason.
I have a motion to approve.
Question? Yes. Joe, did you publish this resolution in your packet?
Yes, you should have all 4 resolutions.
Okay, good. I didn't see it. Okay, go ahead.
Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Roll call. David Blunt,
Yes.
Jerry Clifford,
Yes.
Melissa Swindell,
Yes.
Ray Rohana,
Yes, sir.
Cheryl Sullivan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. President, if we may, can we juggle items 7, 8, and 9, put 7 last, please?
Yes.
So item 8, 4423 Shadeland Avenue property update. I will share with you that we have another very positive, bona fide expression of interest in that property. So that means we have 2 legitimate suitors at the table right now, let alone what else we might find out there if we list a public offering. But before we can do exactly what you just passed on the 46th Street, I need to have 2 updated appraisals because our appraisals go back to 2015. I will be using the on-call appraisal agreements you just approved to get those 2 appraisals. We hope to be bringing to you in our August meeting exactly what Ashley has prepared on 46th Street for the 4423 Shadeland property, and perhaps have that moved as early as, let's say, mid-October. So I think you'll find that these will be exciting times relative to that property after all you've done with in the past. Finally, I'm requesting that the commissioners consider an executive session for 4 p.m. on Tuesday, August 18th for a number of matters I see coming up relative to real estate that we're not ready to disclose at this point in time. So I'm asking for approval of that executive session so it can be advertised.
Have a motion to approve the executive session for August 18th at 4 p.m.
If there are a lot of conflicts, please let us know.
Good.
Motion?
I have a second.
Second.
Roll call vote. David Blunt,
Yes.
Jerry Clifford,
Yes.
Melissa Swindell,
Yes.
Ray Rohana,
Yes, sir.
Cheryl Sullivan.
Yes.
Thank you.
We will be determining, based upon the governor's status with masks and COVID and all of those things, whether we'll be having that in person or by Zoom meeting, and advise you in plenty of time ahead of time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there any other
We
business?
have item 7 yet. The ice-
yes.
Item 7.
Yeah.
I'll be brief. 4:58, so I don't want to run us past. When we did our retainer agreement, I told you I'd keep you in the loop. When you consider, and I finally began getting all the billings bringing through from March to present, it is approaching $50,000. So I just wanted to give you an update. Next month, you'll see the first actual pay come through. But I just wanted you to know that it took more to get through the MDC than we expected. Frankly, it took more to get through some of the negotiations there than expected.
The majority of that is related to the Freegee deal.
The majority is the Freegee deal, is what that is. But I just wanted to let you know, because I had told you that I would. I don't think we're at a point where we need to amend the contract yet, but we may as we approach the end of the year, depending on where we keep going with things. So that was all just by manner of update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any other business to come before the commission today?
I do have one more thing. I want to personally thank Joe Murphy for the way he stepped up to the plate and has really become my right-hand man in every regard. He's providing a lot of leadership behind the scenes. It's my goal to save the city as much hourly rate and travel expense from me as possible by handing that work off as much as I can, and Joe is doing a fantastic job, and I just want to publicly thank Joe for his efforts.
Thank you, Dan.
Oh, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. If there's no other business today, can I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I second the motion.
All right. Mr. Blunt,
Yes.
Yes.
Jerry Clifford, thank you. Melissa Swindell,
Yes.
Ray Rohana,
Yes, sir.
Cheryl Sullivan. There we go.
Meeting adjourned.